directors join us up on stage. Really quickly, can you tell us who you are, what film you're with, and if you have any crew or cast to shout out in the audience, please do so.
Hi, my name is CU10 and my film is Hollow Armor, The One of the Turtle, and my crew is
Hi, Karen Chapman, and my film was Measure.
Hi, I'm Sylvain Cousiat, and my film was The Rat.
I'm Emily Manring, and my film was Jarvik, and my producer is Joanne somewhere in the Hi, my name is Madeline Humphreys, and I'm part of the cast of The Reminiscence of the Green Revolution.
My name is Dean Colin Marshall. I'm the writer, director, and editor of Reminiscences of the Green Revolution.
I'm Brandon Cronenberg. I directed Please Speak Continuously and Describe Your Experiences as They Come to You. Cinematographer Kareem Hussein is here, and our lead Eric Campbell, and possibly some other.
No, keep the mic over there. These are all such wildly different films. I think everybody might be wondering where you came up with the ideas. What was the starting point of these stories? So if you could speak to that a little bit.
So the film was based initially on a dream that I had. The red dream in the film is an actual dream, and I sort of wanted to turn it into a short. But I didn't for a few years, and then Kareem and I were working on some sort of camera effects and visual ideas for a feature film we were working on that got pushed, and so we decided to make a short film and kind of play with some of those aesthetic ideas.
For me, it really started when Trump got elected. And I kind of wrote that as a way to vent out all of these frustrations about what was going on. But I also I wanted to do it in a way that told, instead of the story of like 1 year or even like one day, the story of 30 years. And like 30 years of history, and basically like 15 years after, you know, the Philippines toppled the dictatorial government, and then 15 years before the beginning of the Duterte administration. And we wanted to capture this place that was like in between, that was full of hope, where you overthrow an action movie star president who's super corrupt, and you have this idea of idealistic change, but sometimes you lose the battle, and maybe you get overpowered or overwhelmed. And as we kind of kept making this film, and you know, me coming back to the Philippines where I was born and working with like amazing actors such as like Madeline here, who came all the way out here to just be with us for the premiere. It was really, I think the thing that drove us the most was all these people who didn't get written about in history. Some people that we knew were friends of friends. And when we screened this movie, it was like the 10-year like anniversary of these two journalists who are very dear to our friends, like our filmmaker friends in the Philippines, really beloved in the film community, Alexis and Nika. Yes, they were murdered under, you know, extrajudicially under circumstances that still aren't solved. And, you know, it's very likely that it'll remain unsolved, and we wanted this to be something for people like them, or people who fought but couldn't necessarily win the battle. And it's a super personal one for me because my dad passed away a couple of weeks before we filmed it. So I think that was like on my mind, that you know, like that we'll lose people, but this is a way of remembering them. That just because someone's like gone, like here, doesn't mean they're necessarily lost. and so that's why it is a ghost story, but it's also a love story.
Jarvik started with the idea of the scriptwriter who had a friend when she was younger who lived with a mechanical heart. And then she contacted me, and the script evolved about some ideas, and we worked together with the producer also. So it's
My film started, there was an image in 2015 of a young boy that was washed up on the shore in Lesbos in Greece. And that image went through the media and was used as a symbolic image for the refugee crisis in Europe. And quickly after that, through this dissemination of these images in the media, people lost interest, and the story was a story of yesterday. And so I really wanted to talk about, or portray how we've become completely desensitized to specific things in the media, and how this context of the film kind of shows the desensitization of people towards the refugee crisis. And on the other hand, that image was then reproduced by an artist a year later, where the said artist live on the same place where this young boy was washed up, and live in the same, and reproduced that image one-to-one, and kind of took that symbolic image of the refugee crisis through the death of this small boy, and reproduced it for his own kind of artistic endeavor. And so with this film I also wanted to kind of create this discourse and this discussion for how these images and how these topics are used and are instrumentalized for artistic careers. All the while these people are still kind of going through this hell and die on the Mediterranean Sea. So those were like the ideas behind the film.
Hello Amma is quite a personal story for me. So my grandma passed away like 7 years ago, and back then I was just moved to LA. I was on like a post-student visa, and on that visa it's very restrictive. If I had left the States, I couldn't re-enter, and so I didn't go back to say goodbye to my grandma at her funeral. And over the years, this guilt kind of cascaded a lot inside me, because my grandma was like my mom. She brought me up because both my parents were working. And because I was studying abroad, I went back once a year or once every 2 years, and every time I went back to see her, she was getting more and more frail, and she was kind of on the hospital bed to the end. And so this guilt kind of piled up because, I felt like a very bad granddaughter/daughter, and I felt very helpless because it was something I couldn't control, the immigration system and all these kinds of things. And so I just wanted to write and make a film to, like a love letter to my grandma. But I kind of wanted to make it through the point of view of a little girl, because through the whole experience I felt very helpless, and just completely helpless just about the situation I was in. And this was the first very, very big death that happened to me, and I was kind of, as an adult, brought back to memories of being a child with grandma in the kitchen, and also just my incomprehension of death itself. I just kept thinking like, where is she? Where did she go? Did she reincarnate? Like, is she okay? And all these kind of things. So that's the film.
Karen Chapman, and I made Measure. It was a CFC film, Katie Film Center, and it was my very first real break into narrative. I've been making docs since I was like 16. I'm not 16. And so it was like this challenge to see if I could make something that was loosely based on my own experiences still feel true. And yeah, I think we succeeded. But yeah, it was a really cool process to just write something that was loosely based on my life and loss and trauma. I think my work has been living in that world for the past like 12 years now. Yeah, that's me.
So a bit of a preamble as to why I'm here. After the first screening of this package, there were some reactions And I think in the intro, Robin spoke to identifying like an oversight in the sequencing of the films, and so I've been asked to participate to kind of unpack and give more space to talking through the films that are in the program and the experience of the filmmakers screening here at TIFF, and kind of how give more space to talk about the films than was perhaps given before. And so I want to start by giving Karen a chance to talk about her experience.
I won't forget. Okay, so Miles Davis said, first of all, Miles Davis said that it's not the note that's played that's the wrong note. It's the note that you play afterward that makes it right or wrong. And so this experience has been very confusing for me, but I do feel like we're going through as opposed to above, as opposed to around, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank the TIFF team for their swift and thorough response. Thank you, Robin. And Jason. And thank you, Natalia, for your time this week. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the fact that this is revolutionary. Most of the time when these things happen, it's like an embarrassment that's swept over the rug, but TIFF has been just as courageous and bold, and we're gonna go through today. And I felt heard and respected, and I appreciate that. And I acknowledge that through going through this very difficult conversation, we're gonna learn something. We're gonna learn something about craft. We're gonna learn something about responsibility and about impact. And I'm grateful for that, so let's honor this time with I'm very nervous, so welcome, please. And I understand that we're gonna learn something, but I need to give voice to the fact that it's at a cost. I need to give voice to the fact that it's at a cost. So I couldn't invite my family to the second screening because I came to the first one because of the violence. We've experienced a traumatic event, and your film hurt me. And I don't know if in imagining your film, you ever imagined that I would be your audience, but I was your audience. And it triggered an event, and I didn't quite understand what was happening. And I was at the corner of Spadina and Richmond, is it? 401 Richmond? 401 Richmond. I found peace at that corner, and I just wept, and I wept, and I wept, and I couldn't understand why I was so upset. And I had to, again, this traumatic event. So we're talking about not just race, but a bad thing that happened. And so to experience that violence, I actually purposely avoid things that are gratuitous, because our family went through some stuff, and so I try to avoid a lot of blood and stuff, and it hurt me. But I'm here, because we're gonna go through. And so I wanted to talk about craft, and about what we do, and about being artists, and about agency, and about the right, the privilege that we have as artists to give voice to things, and the fact that we should be able to do that at whim. We should be able to dive into places that are scary, but I need you to understand your impact. And this is a long-winded question, especially coming from Doc and in the work that I've done, long-winded question. As a director, what did you do to protect the people on your set that you asked to be in harm's way like that? How did you protect them on set, and how did you protect them afterwards? Because I feel feel like we're talking about this film, and I feel like what we do can often, the lights and the shine and the glamour, but the fact is, you've got agency, you're here. What have you done to give those people that you've used as props in your film agency?
Yes, he can answer the question. Everybody can speak to how they also manage their performance in their film as well.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for speaking up, and it's an important issue, and it's very important that TIFF is listening to this. I think one point which is very important in the film is that the portrayal of these people in Europe is a very black and white issue, and that a lot of refugees fleeing from different ethnical backgrounds are portrayed through one word, which is the refugee crisis, the waves of refugees, and also there's a symbolic images that kind of is done for that. And this very black and white mentality is how the artist in the film is going about it, and this hypocritical kind of portrayal of this artist in this satire. And what the film does by laying its cards and by kind of instrumentalizing what's happening is that it's bringing the discourse that's happening inside of the film out here to make aware of how this is happening whilst people are dying on the Mediterranean Sea. And that's the satirical aspect of the film that I don't have to explain as a filmmaker because that's satire, and that's the thinking behind that process.
That wasn't a question.
What we have to do in this space right now is give space to what people are going to say. Like, there's not much, we can't pull anything from anyone, right? So people have their own agency, as they did in creating the work that they did, to speak to it the way that they wish to speak to it. And so I want to allow the space for the artists on the stage to participate in the way that they have. I mean, it takes a lot to stand up here.
I just would like to add that, I'm a European, and this is a very European film, and the context in which it's being shown here, it was, in a way, the feedback has been that way very formative and very a learning experience. And I did speak to these performers, who are actors, and we made clear of the boundaries also in how we worked on sets, how the work.
Okay, so is there anyone else who would like to speak to working with their performers before I ask a follow-up question? It's okay if you choose not to. Okay.
I don't think being a European should make you into a different category.
I don't believe also in ganging up on someone, but I believe that it's true. You have to take responsibility and you have to be compassionate. And I'm mixed. I'm Filipina, French American, so I have a little bit of everything. I think it's brave that you're here facing the consequences of the reaction to the film, but I think the thing that as an industry we've been working so hard on is being compassionate, and I hope your next steps are more compassionate.
I just wanted to echo your earlier point about the cost, about our responsibility as artists and what we put up here on the screen having a cost, and particularly about the cost of forgetting. And I think, if anything, I'd like it to be that not only do we not forget like the pain, but also be able to confront it and address it, and then only then do we have like a path to like move on and move forward.
I have a question for you, Sylvain. You mentioned in talking through the inspiration for your work that it directly, you see it in the film also as comment that you're making towards contemporary art, the world of contemporary art, and their utilization of people's pain, right, for profit, as you said. I wonder if you can speak to how you feel in this film that you are doing something different or bringing light to that in a different way.
The images you see, and especially that one sequence, I think we're all kind of referring to, where this collective suicide happens. You know, when I watched the film today as well, it's something that's completely absurd, completely morally wrong, completely cynical, but that's exactly the point of what the film kind of makes. That it kind of creates, in essence, an artwork in the film to which people react to, and to which people in the film, you know, react to by taking selfies, by taking pictures, by all of a sudden this artist in this film has gone from making a mediocre piece of work to something that is going to be on a CV for the is kind of even gained like value probably on a humanitarian way, and no one does anything, right? And they all watch and they all clap at the end, and that's why it's so interesting to see the reaction of a cinema audience clap towards this film at the end, because that's exactly where the film and the artwork kind of at the end merge. And in the response, for me at least, it's exactly this discourse that we bring from the screen into the room and people seem to have understood. And it's a film that is supposed to be thought-provoking and conflicting in these ways, and that's exactly the essence of this kind of satire from my point of view.
I wonder about that. I find what you're saying interesting, because I think that what you're picking up on in your work are images that are widely dispersed, right? So the image of the young boy on the beach, we've all seen. The images of refugees drowning, we've seen and certainly heard, despite not being in Europe.
And what we see in the film are people eating crackers, drinking champagne, watching these images. But that's at the core of that scene, is at the core, and she says she speaks with those who have no voice. That's exactly what the film is, and what the filmmaker, what the artist is as well. That's the point that the film makes, and it was something that was consciously gone through from the beginning, aestheticizing this beauty, the aesthetic beauty, which is completely false and cynical, is what the film does, and why the film stands up here. And that's why I'm so thankful to Robin and Jason for understood that kind of satirical core and programmed the film here.
I guess to finish my question, I was wondering, it's okay. I was wondering how. So let's slightly backtrack. My doctoral research looks at images of violence in contemporary art, and I wonder about what you can add to an image to distinguish it, to offer an audience, or to compel a reaction from an audience that the real image doesn't compel. So
I understand, yeah.
But just to one more time, to break it down one more time.
What we
can I just,
okay. I thought that was the end of the question.
Almost. I wonder if you can explain how what you feel the art does that the image of the boy on the beach in the newspaper didn't do, and what the artwork can compel from someone that the image of the boy dead on the beach couldn't compel. What's the difference there for you?
The difference is that in the beginning of the film, or throughout the first kind of, let's say, half of the film, you as a viewer, as an audience member, are made an observer of the situation which is happening, the status quo of the situation that's happening in Europe and that's happening in the film. And so you have this voice installation that is not kind of present as a voiceover, but it's in the room. You hear it as a source in the room, and all this kind of on this way, that's the ridiculousness of the film, that you go from seeing this guy biting into his cracker, whilst you're watching the kid in the background, which is, by the way, a video made by Sea-Watch, and Sea-Watch is an NGO that specializes in rescuing drowning refugees on the Mediterranean Sea, with whom we work for, and that is one of their videos that they showcase, to again create this ridiculous, to show again this ridiculousness, and we're kind of taking this layer and putting people in front of it and showing them how they react. And all these things kind of commute and kind of not commute, kind of go to this path where when you watch the film, you're completely dulled by where the film goes, and completely dulled by how people kind of then aesthetically kind of kill themselves, and it's again, it reinforces how dulled we have become and reinforces the allegory I was talking about earlier, how this reception of this image of this young boy on the beach was completely forgotten after a while, and that's exactly where the film kind of uses that.
I think we have one more question for all of our filmmakers. We have time for one more question.
Okay. I think violence is present in several of the films, but in different ways. And I wonder if the filmmakers who feel that there is violence in your films could speak to how, in preparation for the production process, you chose to represent that, or how you thought through ideas of violence, if you feel it is represented in your film in some way, shape, or form.
In preparation for putting an 8-year-old through even the remnants of violence, like the past, so the film was like a rumination of someone who's lost. I sat and had like a conversation with his parents about what it was that I was asking him to do, and if they thought that he was prepared for something like that. And I sat with Joseph as well, and I just told him what the film was about, and I just felt like that was my responsibility, and that's it.
For me, kind of similarly, I used a little kid in my film who actually, interestingly enough, has a very similar experience to the kid in the movie. Casting the kid was a big issue for me because I really wanted to have a Singaporean child play Michelle, because just for representation and authenticity, the way we speak is a little different. And so I had done a whole crazy casting thing, which included contacting the Singaporean embassy. That didn't work out. But then, so with the little kid on set, it became a thing where somebody helped me post on Facebook groups, and it was posted in this group called like Singaporean Women in America. And so I got a bunch of emails from Singaporean moms, and one particularly stood out to me because she was saying that her girl, 8-year-old, her name is Sophie, grandpa passed away, and she didn't get a chance to go back to say bye because her mom who was talking to me didn't allow her to go back because the cremation process is very traumatizing. So, but because she didn't let her daughter have the opportunity to say goodbye to grandpa, Sophie was very upset and very guilty, and she had but a red cardinal bird had appeared in their backyard, and so she kept calling the bird Grandpa. Oh look, it's Grandpa, Grandpa's here. So I was like, okay, I gotta meet this girl, and so I went out to Chicago, and I spent a lot of time talking to her and her parents, and even though she's a non-actor and she's just completely just like a little kid who doesn't know what's happening, like she didn't even know why I was there. And, but talking to the parents and everything, they kind of thought that doing this film would be very cathartic for her, and it was, and the whole family was involved, and it was really for her and for me, so we helped each other. It closed a chapter in our lives where we were not able to say goodbye to our grandparents. And I mean, if you ever shot in LA, you know the production limitations are extremely strict, and there are a lot of hours that she has to work, like 6 hours and stuff. So I think she was very well taken care of. And in terms of the turtle, we had an animal wrangler. Turtle was all good. Turtle was always, sad and sad. Great thing that you carry the turtle in. So that's one.
In my film, there's the little boy who used his fist to hit his sister. When I worked the script with the scriptwriter, and when I work with the kids, for me, it was very important. I come from this kind of family, very emotional, and my sister broke my shoulder once, the words to express themselves correctly. Sometimes they get physical. This is where I come from. So yeah, it was. I was just here with the kids to get prepared. And, yeah.
As an actress on the film of Dean, I really appreciated, I guess this is a different perspective, but I really appreciated Dean kind of sitting us all down and letting know the gravity of what we were trying to convey, and telling me the history behind the massacres that were going on during that time. And he also actually told us about the 3 deaths that people go through, and I think he actually elaborates it in a beautiful way, so I'll let him tell you about it.
Yeah, that was a really important concept when we were making this, because I don't know where this comes from, but we say you die 3 deaths. One is when you physically die. The second is when your last family member dies, or last person who knew you, or your last friend. And then the last time is the last time your name is remembered or spoken. And the first 2 are almost guaranteed. But the last one, you know, if we could, tell the story through film or literature or activism, we're able to keep them alive for that, before they die that last death. There's a lot of violence in the movie. I think it's not directly depicted. That was like a conscious choice. In terms of like the first act, which is the massacre, when I worked with a production designer to make sure that we weren't referencing a real one, because we wanted to respect like the victims and still honor their memory through depicting what happened, but not necessarily exploiting the details. So we made sure that all the pictures that we sourced didn't show faces, and that we would like only show it to just the extent that we needed to tell that part of the story. As Matt's explained, we had discussions with all the key crew members about, you know, like what we were referencing, and we also employed not only a lot of like activists to kind of help us like advise on the film, but also cast, you know, the indigenous people and made sure that they were depicted in the way that they wanted to be depicted in the film. And then the last part, which is the explosion and Abner's death. He couldn't be here, and I wish he would be here to explain it to y'all, because I think he would do it better. But for that, you know, he's an activist artist as well, and so he has lost a lot of people, just like in the last, you know, like 10 or 15 years. It's especially for environmental activists, it's the most dangerous place in the world. And so we were sensitive to the fact that, like, you know, not this exact thing happened, but he might know, you know, and he did know people like this who lost their lives for a cause. And I wanted to make sure that he had all the time that he needed to like absorb that. I never tried to like rush him just to get like an effect, and I made sure that everything like felt honest to his character, and really, I just, you know, for everyone and everything, I really tried to like listen and take in, instead of, you know, it's like I didn't want to sketch out like a particular message, but I wanted to ask like these questions, and I wanted to invite my casting crew to explore that with me.
Okay. Thank you all for staying and for being part of this conversation, and for you for staying and listening. I don't think there's any way to talk about these films in the way that they should be talked about in 20 minutes, but I hope you continue to think about them and discuss them with each other, and if there are artists in the room, I hope you've learned something.